Wow. Hello there, folks. This is Shippy the Explorer back with you with another tape video of olden days, our golden days. Were they? Were they? Starting a series of those old time stories of the Caribbean, well, specifically Jamaica, and bring my maps up so you can see my flags, you know, and but the Caribbean on a whole, and Central and South America, North America, and the Western world, and so, but because of all these countries have a connection to slavery and colonization, we all share some similar aspect of life, and you see me in my Washington W t-shirt. That means you know that I'm in the Commanders, the district of the Commanders. Well, we're not talking about football today. We're talking about transportation in the old days. Olden days were golden days. Hey, hey, hey. You think so? Hey, hey. But people don't tell you something about walking. Oh, I'm telling you what. There were days when, in the old days, we talk about the slaves came from Africa, and by 1807, they had stopped the transportation of slaves. The British people had stopped it, but still yet there were some legal ships that were still going into Africa and bringing out slaves. But when the slaves came to the Caribbean, in replacement of the Taínos, especially in Jamaica, they were worked like crazy, worked like, I'm gonna say, horse and donkeys, and because they were the ones who were forming the greater transportation of goods from one end of one place to the next, and they these strong guys and women and men and kids, they would how do you get the products to the market? And they would tie these things on their heads, this big basket, and then underneath the basket, and then on their heads they also have big pans, and under these pans, between the pan, the base of the pan, and the base of the and the top of the head was a soft material made of banana leaves, and they would take the banana leaves and stretch it out, and they would wrap it into a ball, a round circle, and that was called the kata, the cushion between the heavyweight, the load, and the thing. And believe me or not, human being would walk 4, 5, 10, 15 miles. I'm going to tell you, St. Andrew, I can only talk about St. Andrew. These people pack up their loads in the early morning, maybe 3 o'clock in the morning, and they start walking. And they track down the hills of St. Andrew, up Stony Hill, down Constant Spring. And when they reach Constant Spring, well, before they reach Constant Spring, they would stop at a place called Dripping Draw, and they would take a drink of water, and then they start again, and that will take them up Stony Hill and down into Constant Spring, and down in Constant Spring again. They would stop and unload themselves. By this time, I think it was probably 8 o'clock. I can only assume that maybe by 8 o'clock in the morning, they have walked all night with this load. Sometimes these loads were 100 pounds, 80 pounds, 110, 20 pounds on top of the head. But Shippy remind you that the head, the neck muscles are the strongest muscles you have in the body. I can attest to that. So when they reached, they would take down those off their head or help down because they were so heavy, the neck would be compressed to a certain extent, so you can't probably help yourself. But then they would get a drink of water because Constant Spring had the water spring that flew and still flowing through that area, and they would they would have a drink, and maybe if they have the animals, they'll also have the animals. So that is transportation by on foot, walking for miles. And there were other people who would pack up their loads and they would go to the market into Glengulf and Cladmill and St. Mary and Richmond. I'm talking about Port Antonio. And because the main market wasn't in those days, maybe there was a Coronation Market, but a Nutter Bay, and also, and these were the markets in that region. And I think if you talk about Clarendon or St. Catherine, you'd Bagwalk, or down in Linstead Market. Carry me hockey go a Linstead Market, not a quatty would sell. Carry me hockey go a Linstead Market, not a quatty would sell. Oh Lord, not a mite, not a bite, what a Saturday night. Lord, not a mite, not a bite, what a Saturday night. All the people, them a feel up, not a quatty would sell. Everybody come feel up, not a quatty would sell. So Richmond, Caramiakia going Linstead Market. Linstead Market was one of the great ones, folks. Shippy the Explorer is exploring today with you, bringing you the whole days of transportation and market. And why was the markets? We'll probably talk about markets in another tape, but I can mention it, introduce it here, because talking about market, those were the communication centers of the country. People gossip and lavish and lime, and they carry news from country to Kingston and from Kingston back to the country, and who dead and who divorced and who have picnic and which pastor doing his things, with who church is being led by certain things, and who thief what, and who for thief then catch, and who for thief they goat and cow and donkey and all sort of something. The market was the place that you disseminate information or you gather information. But we'll talk about that on another tape, another whole time days. Today we're talking about transportation in the old days. Remind you that you're watching Shippy the Explorer, and thanks if you like these type of tapes and stories. You like to share, subscribe, folks, and do make comments, because I sometimes I'm not perfect. I'm not Jesus. So I know I probably make some mistakes here and there, but we run with the flow. Yes, Shippy the Explorer is bringing up from what he remembers or from what he was told in the old days. So come along. There were some times after that in the olden days, poor days, all you could hear around you in the early morning is ee, ee, the horse and the donkey. That was the sound of the morning and the day. And the donkeys and the mules. I don't know if the mules ever make noise. Mules can make noise. You write me and tell me if you have mules ever make noise. I don't remember if I ever hear a mule make noise, but it was the donkeys, the mules, the horses, and the bulls. And the bulls, sometimes the cows, that were the ones after that took over some of the burden. And the donkeys are called the beasts of burden for one thing, because I'm going to talk about, let's talk about how the donkeys were loaded. The horses are one thing and the thing, and the cows are another thing. But the donkeys, you would have what they call a hamper, two big baskets, straw baskets made out of starple or rose up strips, branches, and straws, and then one on that side and one on the other side, and it's hooked on the donkey back. You'll have two hooks. You'll have a hook and two hooks over here, and the straw baskets, they would have some rope, and you just drag the rope of this, and the basket hangs on the belly of the donkey on one side, and on the other side you put another basket, and in those baskets, believe it or not, I suspect we have 150 pounds in one side, another 150 pounds on the other side. Easy, well, to be conservative, I would say 100, because I remember lifting up one of those baskets and I couldn't lift it up. And I know I was a very strong man in those days. I could lift up 100 and something pounds. So the donkeys were probably carrying well over 200 pounds. And you load those donkeys, and then on the basket you strap it, and then a rope comes from the basket, from the cushion on the back of the bird, the donkey, and the rope goes around the tail and then comes back around. That keeps a little bit of sturdiness. Yeah, Shippy the Explorer, we exploring old time days, boy. And you load up the donkey, and sometimes you load up the mule just like that, and you load up the bull sometimes like that. But the main ones that were used from long distance journey with a load were the donkeys and the mules. The horses were used mainly for riding, as far as I remember. And the cows and the bulls were also used, but they were used mainly in the sugar mill industry, or the sugar industry, where they would use them to pull, to drag turn the mills of the sugar mills, the sugar cane mills, or the corn grinding mills, and they would be used for that. So there was a time when you had all these animals, and you line them up, you load them up and line them up, and you start to walk with your produce, your yams and your bananas and potatoes and carrots and chocolate and all the goods of coming out of the subsistence farms up in the hills of St. Andrew, Portland, and St. Mary, St. Catherine. And they're coming from the hills, and they're coming down into the taverns, the squares, and there you set up. The ladies are set up, and sometimes the ladies, they stay in those markets for the whole, from they come in from Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. They don't leave that market until maybe Saturday evening or Saturday night, and sometimes they don't get to sell all those produce, but they're at the market selling. But the thing is, they start to walk. And for those of you who are coming from St. Andrew, you know that they're coming from way up in Lawrence Tavern and King Weston, and they walk down through Temple Hall and Golden Spring, and when they reach Constant Spring, they sometimes rest, and they take the tram car down into Kingston. Or if they're going to Glengolf Market, or they're going to Richmond Market or Linstead Market, they cut through the bushes, through Glengolf, and they come down through down into Bag Walk, and then they reach Linstead. But Glengolf, they'll go from St. Andrew, they go through Mawoni, and then they come down, and then when they reach Glengulf, they are there. Clodmill is another thing. They would go from the northern part of St. Andrew, cut across the river, Tom's River, and then they climb up into St. Mary, up into Clydesdale. And that was it. In Notta Bay, they would be coming down from Long Road, and they were coming down from Happy Hut, and they were coming down from Camberwell, and they'll come down to Notta Bay. The place is called Parish of St. Mary. So these were the times when the women and men and kids, sometimes they would be walking in front or behind these donkeys and mules, and they walk and walk until they reach these markets. But transportation was soon evolving. The richer folks then came hand carts, and hand carts are not they have been going around for a long time. But hand carts, you bring the goods to the market, but then you have hand carts in the local markets, and then you would be pushing these things from around, and they'll put the goods on the carts and take it from one section of the market to the next. But there are some areas in the towns where you could use a hand cart for 1 or 2 or 3 miles. You had to push, and then you bring them down. And then there was another case where if you're near the Rio Grande or Rio Cobre and all that, especially the Rio Grande or White River, Milk River, and the farmers way up in the mountains, they would come down, put their goods on these barges, bamboo floats, bamboo rafts, and then they would sail or push their way down the river, down to the coast, and there you get the goods to the market. But after a while, in 1908, between 1908 and 1927, you had cars start to develop, and Mr. Ford was developing the Model T, and out of the Model T you had some Ford trucks. Later on some Ford trucks were being made and exported to the countries, and Jamaica and some of the other islands, and all over the world now. These trucks were being exported to, and these trucks now were being used to go up into the bushes, up into the hills, on gravel roads, and they kick the dust up and slip and slide, and they'll go up into the hills, and they reach the end of the extent as far as they can, and then they start to pick up the market people, and they load up those trucks one by one until they reach a certain from miles down the mountains. Then the trucks will be loaded. The women in the back on wooden benches sitting down, and on top of their heads is another layer with bags and baskets and buckets and pans and goods tied up on top of that. And in front of them, in another section of the cage, the wooden cage, is another section in the front between the driver and the wooden carrier. There would be other goods And whenever you're taking up a person and you stop at a certain stop and you're going to pick up a bag of yams or bananas or breadfruit and coconuts, the strong guys that just run to the side of the thing, the lady would be helped up into the truck. Minding, she don't have on pants those days, it was dress. She has on her frock. And she gently hold her frock and she climb up into the truck. And she find a seat beside Miss Jane. And they start to lavish. And these strong men would grab the bag and they swing it. They sail it up into the air, and the one on top of the truck top, they'll catch it. And they drag it up and pack it. So when the truck is finally loaded, then you see it's rocking, and it's rocking down the hill. And sadly, in some of those days, those 4 trucks, they're trying to negotiate some of these turns and these curves in the mountainside. And when they try to make some of the turns and they can't make the turn in one bend, they reverse and then try to straighten up to come around. And unfortunately, 1 or 2 of these trucks have gone over the gully with the market people, goods and donkeys and goods and animals and everything, men and women and kids and goods and driver, and everything is gone over the embankment. And a lot of times, unfortunately, we have lost some of our ancestors in that way. But most of the time, the majority of the time, those trucks, they'll rock and roll and negotiate themselves, and they blow their horn and they change their gear. And in the front of the truck, you know, you have the driver and maybe 2 market women, the 2 pretty ones. Yes, let's put for 2 pretty ones. One on the left and one between, right where the gear is. And as the driver changes gear, his hands rush against the legs of that woman. Shippy the Explorer is telling you what used to happen, man. And that was the enjoyment of the driver. And when the pressure catch the gear stick, the engine, and the gear shake, you know, the gear was shaking against the lady's legs. I'm not talking X-rated, nothing was that didn't happen. I saw it go. Hey, push come to shove. You know much time the driver enjoy themselves that way. Anyway, they would negotiate themselves and they reach a market, and the strong men would unload the goods, the bags, the crocus bags and the baskets of goods. And then the women would be helped down most of the time. And then they called the hand cart, the go-kart man. And the go-kart man would distribute, load up his cart and take the woman and her stuff to a particular part of the market where she would reside and sell for the next 3 days, 2 or 3 days. And then after that, you'd have after trucks, you'd have what they call country buses. The country buses were the most fascinating thing in the world. In Jamaica, you had those country buses, and the suspension was like the buses were on spring, because when the buses are loaded with the market people and the people going to Kingston, and especially the mail bus coming through Junction. Junction is a part of a gorge that runs from Annotto Bay up through Stone Hill, right down into Kingston. And then there's another gorge over in the St. Catherine side. For those of you who don't know Jamaica, I'm using Jamaica as my base for these stories. And on top, there's a carrier on top of the bus, these mail bus. And they would be stocked and stocked and stocked off of goods. And sometimes a one or two goat and a hog or a pig is tied up there. And the roads of the gorge were windy and steep bends and high and steep slopes. And when you hear and see those buses coming around the corner, the buses are lean like 45-degree angle. The wheels are one way, this way, and the body of the top of the bus is this way. And the horns are bum, 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 and the driver is blowing and playing the music with the horn. The musical horns, and then he changes the gear, and the gears are changing in the meantime. And in the bus you hear the ladies singing, drop in a gear for me, Mr. Driver, drop in a gear for me. And you hear, and when you're driving, remember your gear back. Drop in a gear for me, Mr. Driver, drop in a gear for me, Mr. Driver. And those mail buses would negotiate those steep curves of junction, maybe Bogwalk, Port Antonio, Clarendon, and they were all heading towards Coronation Market. Sometimes Constant Spring, sometimes Crossroad, but the majority of them were going downtown. And I don't remember driving in. I didn't get a ride in those buses because I was scared. I was always scared that the buses would turn over. And they did. And people have gotten injured. But the comfort, the closeness of the market people and the music and the gearbacks and the singing and some sleeping too. Some of them tired like hell, them asleep because they know they are going to be up because they have been up from 3 o'clock in the morning. Some snoring too. But eventually they reached town. And that was the buses, the transportation of goods to the market. But those buses, they had just not market people, but people going into town to do banking and purchase and other transactions. So that was the case of transportation by bus in the old days. And we're not going to forget what they call tramcar. And I'll have one more set of transportation before we finish this tape. Tramcars were electrical kind of train, the electrical cars set on tracks, iron tracks, almost like a train. And I'm sure, I know, that the tramcar run from downtown Kingston straight up, and it terminated one branch, terminated in Constant Spring. And those cars were used to pick up the market people from that who had gathered at Constant Spring from various parts of the hills. And then they would reload themselves and they jump on the tram cars. Because the tram cars were, the power of the tram cars was electricity. And electricity drove the motors. And those tram cars would take women and kids and men, barefoot or no shoes, into Kingston, where they would do their transaction, buying and selling and other goods. Some going to court, some going to visit people in the prison, some some going to do land paper, pay tax, all those things. Some going to buy ticket to go to England so they can jump on the banana boat and gone to England. And then the goods of the subsistent farming were also transported from the hills down to the coast. I can talk about the Nota Bay and maybe Port Antonio, where after the goods are come to the coast, they would be loaded at the train station. Packed up at the train station, and women and kids and the people would wait for the train, and the train would run from Port Antonio up through St. Catherine and hit through near Spanish Town and come into Kingston. And then there was another branch that ran from Montego Bay and come through Porus and all that here right into Kingston. And all along those long tracks there were markets. So sometimes they would stop at these markets. Definitely Linstead Market, I would think. Some of the market people would come off. They don't want to go to Kingston. Competition is too strong. Hey, I'm telling you. Talking about golden days. Were they good? Were they bad? Huh? Maybe. Yeah. And then, one of the final way of transportation for goods in the old days was boating. Whether the banana boat or the fruit boat or the jackfruit boat or whatever it is, the people would come to the coast and they would load their stuff in these boats, and one or two men would start the rowing, and they row up into Nota Bay or Port Antonio, that type of thing, and sometimes maybe Kingston. They'll come around the coast and row into the ports, and then from the ports, then they would have the handcart man meeting them again and picking up, transporting them to the market. So you see, we have come a long way. Now a lot of these goods now are transported into the market by cars and buses, and you don't hardly see the trucks anymore. But the olden days, you'd see all those things. You don't see, yes, we forgot the donkey cart. Because there was one time when they had donkey carts, or horse carts, or mule carts. And the cart, the two wheels in the back with a container in the back, like a carriage, would be tied to the harness to the animal. And then you have these donkeys that will be pulling the carts. You see them still being used in Israel, Palestine, and all those places, and some places up in the country. You still see the donkeys pulling some carts. And actually you see them along Spanish Town Road. If you're in Jamaica or in anywhere you see cane fields, sometimes you see the donkey carts still. And believe it or not, they move, and they're not that slow. They're pulling, they're maybe 5-6 miles an hour, pretty fast. You see them running up into Boulevard, way up there. Once in a while you see a donkey cart or a mule cart. So those were the ways of old ways of transporting the goods. So to the market, And then in the market, you'd buy and sell and you'd take back another form of transportation back to your home. And you're going back home on the bus, the cart, the boat, the donkey, the horse. And sometimes, in the whole old days, you would walk 15 miles uphill back to your house with the bread and the bun and the oil and the dry fish and the codfish and some butter, the rice, the peas, the flour. What else we're leaving out? Now we say oil, salt, beef, salt, pork, shad, herring, mackerel, and sprat. And sometimes the mother would bring what they call coconut cake and a bulla, a lollipop. And if they really made a good sale, they would bring one American apple, tie up in an apron. And on Sunday morning, they'll wash that apple and they share it. They share it. But in the meantime, you smell the sprat frying. So those were reminiscent. I hope you can be reminiscent with me with these stories, folks. In the olden days, or golden days. And whether you were walking, you had a shoes or you walked barefoot, you had to go. You had to go. You had to survive. You had to, because you have to take care of the kids. Because a lot of times it was many mouths to feed. Sometimes 8, sometimes 10, sometimes 12, sometimes 14. Did they go 18 sometimes? Yeah. We just finished a tape. Why? I think we're going to do that tape or we just released it. But anything, why did grandma have so many kids? But fun was also there. So Shippy the Explorer is saying, I hope I brought you back in the old days and you know, I'll just show you my, this is a Crown Royal 1940 something Crown Royal. I don't even know the, see if I can find my paper. 1954 Crown Royal. All these parts came from that car. And look at it. Look at it. But Model T Ford was long gone. But transportation, the wheel, did us well and doing us well. Shippy the Explorer saying, take care. Hope you're enjoying this tape. Like, share, and subscribe, man. Let's build this station. Click the button. Let's build this thing so it can, and as soon as you subscribe and do any more of these stories, you'll hear cling. It comes to you free of cost. And you can just get a cup of tea or chocolate or cocoa and sit down with your piece of white bread and butter. And you sit down and listen to these stories. Take time to relax. Listen to Shippy the Explorer stories. Long time stories. Come back to Bump. Take care of yourself and others. Walk good. Well, drive good too. Donkey, shut up.